Okay, thank you for tuning in. This is On the Corner Interviews, real people, real places. My name's Eddie.
And you already know who it is. It's that one nigga Nick.
And go ahead and we have a special guest. My bad. Go ahead and introduce yourself, man.
Hey, I'm Damian. Scott Shawver, the first, hopefully the last.
Damian. So tell me about yourself, man. Where are you from?
I'm from Van Nuys, which is right behind us. That's why I picked this spot. You could see the neighborhood that brought me up.
Okay.
So, Panorama.
Van Nuys, no
Van
Panorama.
Nuys, Van Nuys. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so tell me about Van Nuys. When did you, what's the first part of life as a little kid growing up in Van Nuys? What was that like?
Well, I was born at this hospital that's now apartment buildings called Northridge. And yeah, being young was cool. I lived here, like I was born in Van Nuys, and then I lived in Van Nuys very, very early. And then I moved to Northridge over by the college for a little bit. And that's kind of where I got my earliest memories. So stuff like almost drowning in the pool, and like my older sister used to cut my eyelashes. Just, weirdo, those are like the early memories. Then, yeah, it's kind of a blur for me when it comes to growing up. A lot of shit I must have blocked out.
Really? So tell me, what were you getting into as a young kid? What were you doing?
Nothing crazy. So really early on, like nothing. I was with my mom, and then really life got started for me when I was maybe about 8 years old, when I moved out of my grandma's house and in with my mom's boyfriend at the time, and that was over in Van Nuys, in a different part of Van Nuys, and we're in like a nicer house, a quieter neighborhood. The pools I was almost drowning in weren't apartment pools anymore. We had a pool at the house, and I had a couple friends in the neighborhood, and we'd go to the plant, go to the arcade. Nothing too dramatic. Yeah, and that was it for a little while, and then my mom separated from that guy, and now I got a little brother.
Really?
Yeah, and then we ended up moving back into my old grandma's house, still in Van Nuys, different part of the neighborhood, a little bit louder of a neighborhood, a little bit more gang activity, more drug activity. So,
what was a regular day for Damian growing up, man? What would you do? School? Hang out with your friends? Tell me something about that.
I would go to school. I went to Fulton College Preparatory, which is just down the street here, and I'd go to school. My family was broke, so my school had uniforms, so that was just what I wore all the time. So I'd go home, I'd watch TV, look outside if there were any kids hanging out outside. I would, go out there. I had a friend named Malik, had a friend named Angel. We used to kick it a lot.
Did you like school?
I hated school. No.
Why did you hate school?
I hated school because I was extremely hyperactive, and I was always, ever since elementary, all the way up until maybe my 9th grade year, teachers would always set me aside and say, "Hey, you got to go to the part of the classroom where nobody else is because you talk too much. You talk too much. You talk too much." So that was always kind of the theme in school, was just me getting set aside because of my hyperactivity, my curiosity in everything that wasn't academic.
So you had bad grades?
Horrible grades, yeah. So
horrible grades.
I got the Bush administration is the reason I got through middle school, because we had the No Child Left Behind program. So that's the only reason I made it through middle school. And then when high school came around, my first year was good. I went to Panorama High School, which is where I originally met my now partner. You guys will meet, in a second. I'm doing an interview with him in a minute. John. Yeah. That's where I originally met him. That was my freshman year, 2009. And that was a good year. I joke around and say that was my last happy year, because that's before all the, life, mental health. That's when all that shit started to really matter.
Mental health. So,
yeah.
What's your opinion on mental health? Is it important? Is it something you need to focus on? If you look at the generation now and just life now, people go through a lot of serious stuff, and it's hard.
Yeah, so I think if you're not going to focus on it, because focusing on it can bring you down when you make it, your main shit. If it's all about you all the time, it can, at least for someone like me, it can really bring you down thinking about it too much. But I do think you have to be aware of it. I think you have to keep an eye on it, unless you're one of the lucky ones who don't suffer from anything. Because, I've had family members, I've had friends who suffered from stuff, and either, most of the time, they don't pay attention to it at all. So they fall into drugs, they fall into to dealing, they fall into all types of shit. That is, I guess in my neighborhood, pretty average. Like a lot of people in my neighborhood, a lot of junkies, a lot of burnouts. So that was one thing I never wanted to be involved in. So I have, on my mom's side, I have one older brother, one older sister, and I'm the first one to graduate high school.
Nice.
It took me 6 years. I did it in a continuation, but, still the first one to get a diploma.
You did it.
Yeah, and a lot of that came from seeing, my mom's boyfriend at the time, or whoever, my older sister. A lot of that came from seeing them kind of dip in and out of troubles, and I always told myself, never really anyone else, but I always told myself I love them, they're my family, but I just don't want to end up like that. I want to make sure I'm good, and that if I ever do end up having kids, they don't got to go through the same kind of struggles I did. Which, I feel like I'm blessed. Maybe not. I'm not religious or anything, but I consider myself lucky in the fact that I got to see other people around me kind of spiral down.
Now tell me, what do you think the key to happiness is? Your opinion.
Shit.
Does happiness even exist? Is that something that doesn't exist, or you're just dealing with the times?
No, bro, happiness exists. I think for some people it's fleeting. It's hard to grab onto. For me, I know what makes me happy. It's just, for me, it's a constant. It's like a chase. It's like I do things to be happy, and then I get the thing that makes me happy. But then in order to stay happy, I got to keep doing it. It's almost like a junkie. You gotta keep doing it to stay where you want to be. But I guess the key so far that I've found is consistency. If you're able, since growing up, I was in and out of different houses. I was moving a lot. I always had different men in my life, like older men, not sugar daddies or anything,
You mean father figures, right?
Father figures.
Just had to make that clear.
Yeah. And so I've always strived for making my life consistent. Even me, I moved out when I was 17.
Really?
Yeah, just because I had a buddy who his whole family loved me. I loved his whole family, so they let me move in at 17 because they knew, bro, you shouldn't be in a one-bedroom apartment with 5 other people in bed bugs. You know what I mean? And so they got me out of that, and that was my first taste of okay, you guys, we're all struggling together. Yeah, but they were consistent. They were a family. They've been with each other forever. There were never too many other variables. And so that was kind of my first taste of that at 17 years old, and then ended up getting kicked out of that place for just reasons, shit happens. And then not until maybe, a train, hell yeah, that's what I wanted.
Okay.
Right on.
So tell me something.
Yeah.
So tell me something. What do you think about what's it called? Growing up in Van Nuys, what do you think about the homeless problem?
I think it sucks.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair.
Hold on one second. Let the train pass.
I think it's unfair. My father was homeless a lot here, in Van Nuys. He was homeless. God. Which was weird because when he stopped being homeless, you still have homeless friends. So I would be walking down the street, we'd be going to Hometown Buffet or something, and it'd be like, oh, hey, Jerry. It'd just be some homeless guy, So I think growing up with that, kind of perspective, it's made me really feel for homeless people, because these aren't just people on the street. These are people with stories. These are people who were who were kids once. You know, they were going to school, they had jobs, and it was just a couple slip-ups, not enough people who were willing to help. That's the main reason they're there, you know? Whether that's induced by them or out of their circumstances, regardless, I mean, they're all people, and they should all be treated as such. So, yeah, I think homelessness is bullshit. I think, like, right now there are people
So
talking...
you think homeless people should have aids and maybe opportunities?
Yeah, I think they should have help. I think they should have
help,
legitimate help. They should... Every citizen should be able to have... they should all be given a solid foundation to build off of. And just in this country, I mean, no, that's not what it is. If you fall, you fall, and nobody gives a shit. And I think that's super unfair. I think that, I just genuinely think it shouldn't be like that. And there's a thing going on, like, they're talking about building a shelter, like a permanent shelter in Chatsworth. And just to see all the negative responses from people is ridiculous, because that could only really be a positive thing. You know what I mean? And to have people be so selfish that, one, they don't want homeless people in their neighborhood, but they're not willing to build a place to give these homeless people to go. It's just never made sense to me. So I think homelessness is bullshit. And that also kind of goes with mental health. A lot of these people are people who are genuinely crazy. You know, I work downtown. I've seen some crazy motherfucking homeless people. But, you know, if you have help at the jump, if you're like, hey, I'm feeling weird, but I don't have money for health insurance, I can't get a psychiatrist, I can't get on any medication, then there you go. You're already on a slippery slope to failure. And, yeah, I think there needs to be a shift in overall just consciousness when it comes to how we think about homeless people, how we think we have to help homeless people. Because the only way that we could all get better is if we let all of us get better. You know, we can't expect to strive if there are people outside your door starving, you know?
Okay, so tell me, how important is a conversation? How important is two people talking and the things that you might talk about? And because you never know, you have a conversation with somebody, you can lighten somebody's day up. And that's something that helped them through something, right? Let the truck pass.
Sorry, we picked a really big
No, it's
area.
all good. Or you could also have a conversation with somebody and ruin their day.
Mm-hmm.
And that could send them over the top, or whatever the case is. So tell me, how important is a conversation?
I mean, I think you have to be... I think a conversation is super important. Conversation is the only way things can happen. You know, more problems get solved through conversation than they do altercation, you know. On very few occasions, I mean, of course I've seen it happen where two guys are, like, they're homies, and then they disagree with each other, and then they fight, and then it's, like, all better, you know, it's, like, cathartic in that way. But how I've always dealt with things, like, my whole life, I've only ever been in maybe one fight, and it wasn't even a fight, I just got punched in the face, you know? And in my opinion, that was me, like, I failed, like, I let it get there. And I'm kind of, I don't want to say known, but growing up, I was kind of known to push people's buttons and to kind of be a bit of a antagonist. But, and even still, like, in the workplace, I still try and push buttons and, you know, make people uncomfortable.
I mean, you are who you are, right?
Yeah, like, but none of it comes from any place of malice, you know. But I think conversation is super important. I mean, overall, I'm a more of an introvert. I tend to stay home, you know, watch TV, hang out with my girlfriend and my pets. So I don't find myself conversing too much unless it's lately in a scenario similar to this one, you know, where it's you know.
So you're saying yourself that you're an introvert. So where does an introvert come to when he wants to start a podcast?
Dude, I don't know. Well, it was my buddy John's idea.
Yeah.
And I trust my buddy John. And I said, hey, is it cool if I drink on the podcast to keep me comfortable? And he said, hell yeah. Because, you know, we all have our vices. And sometimes in order to...
That was a gimmick.
It was a gimmick, but now it's real. So I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
How do you get to do a podcast, and then tell me how you feel about podcasting?
Yeah. Coming from an introvert's
Yes.
perspective. Okay. It's difficult. It is, because sometimes I find myself personally. Sometimes I think of myself as sort of a selfish kind of person, which probably has pigeonholed me. You know, because once you say something out loud, that tends to make it real. So it has been difficult, but I mean, I've always considered myself a bit of a performer, and you know, this is just micro performing. You know, it's performing in front of one other, maybe two other people, and when the camera's on, they're performing too. So it's like you guys are just exchanging in this kind of live.
So you feel like you're playing a role, basically.
Almost, yeah. That's a good way.
Okay. So performing, you're a performer, you say. So if you're not speaking about a podcast, what are you talking about? What else do you perform in?
Well, I consider. I mean, I used to play in a band.
Okay, so you played an instrument.
Yeah, I used to play bass in this band, and whenever we were on stage, I always I wasn't the front man, but I always liked to take the reins of, okay, I'll talk to the crowd, I'll manage the crowd, I'll work the crowd. You know, that's always kind of been what I've been gravitated towards. That's what I've gravitated towards, and that could go all the way back to, you know, me being hyperactive in elementary and middle school, and the teacher always put me aside because I was always trying to, you know, either make people laugh or make people mad, or I don't know. I love it, and eventually, I'd like it to grow into. I'd like it to grow enough to where it's more than just me doing it with one other person or two other people. But yeah, that kind of stuff comes with time. It comes with practice. It comes with more consistency. Yeah.
So if an introvert is a performer, has a podcast, and plays a band in front of people, so does that really make you introvert?
No, it's different. I am so much better at talking to 50 people than I am talking to one person. Maybe it goes back to the selfishness I was talking about. You know, all eyes on me. You know, I was a middle child for the last, you know, once my older brother was born, I was the middle child. So I guess it was always me kind of fighting to kind of be that center of attention. My older brother growing up was a real problem child. My older sister was a problem child. I was the only one my only thing was I was bad at school. You know, I wasn't causing any troubles in the neighborhood. I wasn't getting arrested from the Target we were just at. Like, one of my sisters, I only have one sister, so she could figure it out. You know, I was never doing that kind of stuff, so it kind of, I guess this is just how it manifested, was me wanting to perform in this way, rather than, you know, because positive affirmation is better than negative affirmation.
So what you can say, and what anybody else can say, is you're human, you're a person. So
Last I checked.
Yeah. So how do you feel about just being a person, and with all the hate in the world, racism and war and all this stuff, what's it like to just be a person?
I mean, it's hard if you're not. I'm sure if you're ignoring it, it's really easy, because it's easy to ignore if you look a certain way and you live in a certain area. Just to, you know, turn a blind eye. But me growing up in an area like this, being exposed to people who aren't just white and well off, you know, it's really given me the perspective to be able to. Oh, we got a guy behind us.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, it's given me perspective to empathize with shit. And I mean, obviously, if you're a good person, you know it sucks. You know.
Yeah.
And I like to consider myself a decent person. So.
That's good, man. So coming to an end, what's something you think, Damian, you need to put out in the world, and what do you feel, and just something you'd like to say?
I think, me personally, what I can do to change things is to just make people laugh. It's my favorite thing to do. I love to tell jokes. I like to rile people up. And I think the more of that there is in the world, the better we end up, because, you know, when you're laughing, you're in a good mood. You could be in the shittiest mood, but as soon as somebody makes you laugh, even if you're crying, you feel better, you know? So I feel like the more of that there is, the better off we all are. And that's really...
That's good. Okay, so this is On the Corner interviews. Oh wait, actually, Nick, do you have any questions you want to add? What do you think?
Man.
We got a whole perspective on Damian right here.
Listening to everything you said, man, I admire you, honestly.
Thank you.
I admire your
You have an
personality.
admirer. You have
Join
an
the
admirer.
club.
And all I want to say is, like, what's personally, like, the next step for you? You know, like, how do you think you're gonna make your next move?
Well, coming out of the podcast that me and my partner do, him and I, right now, our closest plans are to start, you know, going to, what are they called?
Strip clubs.
Not strip, the other clubs. Damn. Like open mic nights.
Okay.
You know,
Ooh.
doing stand-up, writing jokes,
All right.
What?
getting real about it, you know?
Wow, that's good.
That's something I've been wanting to do for a while. Another thing about me is it's almost impossible for me to do anything without like a partner, without somebody pushing me.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily I found it in, you know, my partner, my buddy.
All right, so
So let's meet him, right?
yeah, let's go ahead and meet him.
Well, hey,
My
thanks.
name, no, go ahead. My name's Eddie.
And you already know who it is. It's
And,
Nick.
go ahead and sign me out, man.
All right. On the Corner podcast, On the Corner interviews.
And plug anything you want to plug.
Thank you, Damian Scott Shawver, the first and the only,
Right.
from the Valley's Finest podcast.
Thank you for being a part of this.
Look us up on Instagram at the.valleys.finest. You guys will be on it
A lot of dots.
soon. 3 dots.
Nothing wrong with 3
What?
dots.
Nothing wrong with 3 dots. Last time I checked. My crazy life, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Peace.
Later.